Welcome everyone to It Tastes Different Gaming Appetizers, and tonight we got some news that's not too happy. SAG-AFTRA voice actors for video games are officially on strike over AI. So it's happening again, right? We just got done with all the regular actors and AI and voice actors, and now we got voice actors for video games. I guess they've been in contract negotiations for the better part of a year, and it's just not going the way they want. They're saying that the game developers aren't giving them enough AI protection and what they want, even though they do mention that there have been strides to meet most of what they're looking for, but they need better protection for, for AI. So they are basically refusing to work on new games and a number of major developers, which includes like Activision, Disney, EA. There was mention of the GTA 6 game is not affected by this as of yet, but the longer the strike goes on, it may be. There was a posting. If you can actually go on their site, and if you know the production ID, you can search their site, the SAG-AFTRA site, with the production ID of the game. You can put the names in there, but it's not a reliable search because some games are under code names, and some games names are really close to a code name of another game. So the most accurate way is to put in the production ID of the game to see if they're affected. And basically there was a post about like GTA 6 was not affected, but the studio behind some of that is being struck. So if you're on like a day-to-day where you're not really under a contract, you're free to work without repercussion on that game and things like that. So here's hoping for that one for anybody who's worried about that. But be prepared for game delays, especially the longer this goes on. The more games are going to be pushed back. So we just are starting to see recovery from COVID in games that were starting or in the middle of development through COVID, and the whole shutting down of everything, and things were starting to get back to normal pace on video games. But now we've got a whole bunch of layoffs happening in the video game industry, and now we're getting a whole bunch of voice actor strikes. And so I don't have any qualms with what they're striking over. They need to protect their rights and likenesses and voices and stuff like that. With all the generative AI out there, it is a landmine for people to protect their own likeness and things like that, because what AI has done out there, especially generative AI, is pretty kind of scary if that's your livelihood and they can just copy your voice and they don't need you anymore. Obviously, generative AI is still a ways away from, things like inflections and, meaningful sound. I've heard some of the stuff, and it's, it doesn't have the feeling behind it. It just sounds flat. Some of them is really good, but it's still not as, where it can be. But they got to look to the future, right? Protect themselves from what could happen in the future. And so it's going to be, a rough time. I think when I was reading it, it said there was 18 months of negotiations that are falling through. That's pretty bad. Well, it's 18 months, so it's been closer to 2 years and not really a year like I'd read earlier. But so they're saying 18 months, and they can't really get a fair, reasonable protection against AI. So they've got to strike. Will video game developers cave to their demands and give them their protection? Time will tell, right? The longer this goes on, though, the more it's going to hurt their bottom dollar. And in the year or two of layoffs and market corrections, I don't think they're in a place right now to do this to themselves. They are, the big dogs in there, like I said, Disney and EA, Activision, all them. They start hurting their bottom dollar here pretty quick when they're putting off delays for 6 months, 7 months, a year because of the voice actor strike. I think 2016, I think, was the last time the voice actor strike went on. So it's been a rough, 10 years for video games, if you will. I mean, they had this heyday period during COVID where more people were playing and picking up games, but games got delayed towards the end of COVID because of, the workforce, and things like that. So video games are having a hard time bouncing back after all of this. And I think this is just another nail in that coffin for some of these developers. It's going to be rough. So let's see what happens and how long this strike is going to last. But if you've got a production ID for for a video game, you can go out to the SAG-AFTRA site on the strike and they've got a lot of information on the SAG-AFTRA site about the strike and who's affected and what they're looking for and things like that. But basically, it's all centered around generative AI and their likeness and voices and things like that. There needs to be protection. So the longer this goes on, the one of, a few things is going to happen. The developers are going to cave, or they're not going to cave and they're going to try to just continue to go as they are now, or they're going to have scabs, or it's just going to force generative AI to come along quicker for them, right? They're going to use AI to do a lot more voice acting or voices for their stuff, I don't know. It's going to be rough. It's a rough time for video games, and this is just hurting them even more. Nick, what do you think, man? I mean, with all the turmoil that's been in the gaming industry with layoffs and things like that, and now just recouping, and delays after delays, and now things are starting to smooth out on the delay side. Now we have the voice actor strike. It's hard to imagine a game these days without some type of voice acting, right? Because I don't remember the last time I had to just like completely read through a game that wasn't, from a smaller studio that didn't have voice acting. But most AAA games these days is full of voice acting. It's almost like 80 to 90% voice acting for all the stuff and hardly any reading. So what do you think this spells for the video game industry as a whole? And do you agree or disagree with the voice actor strike?
I agree with the strike. I mean, I agree that AI, there is not just for them, for the voice actors doing gaming and stuff like that. It's pretty much, there should be regulation and certain laws and things like that behind AI for everything, right? Because right now it's kind of the wild, wild west out there when it comes to people making AI pictures and posts and using someone else's likeness and things like that. And there's no regulation or any way for people to turn around and do something about that, right? So there's the government really needs to come in and put down some legislation to legislate stuff like this, because you can't let it run rampant. But as far as that goes, as far as gaming goes, yeah, this is going to cause some delays with a lot of our games. We're seeing it. I would say the games coming out this year will be fine, but because their lines are probably already done, most likely. But next year or the year after that or whatever, this is going to hurt them. But it makes sense for them to want to do this. The only problem is I could see companies. I think companies will give in at first, but they will look to be utilizing AI more and more to do the voice acting and stuff like that. And they don't need to use, ultimately, I think they're going to be like, we don't need to use someone's likeness. It doesn't have to be a Troy Baker or something like that. We can just use some knockoff, generative AI voice that is good enough, right? Because these big publishers, Ubisoft, Activision, EA, and stuff like that, that's typically what they give us is good enough, right? It's good enough. It'll pass. And most of the time it does pass. It shouldn't, but it does. And so that's why they can get away with a lot of the crap they get away with nowadays, with things that we sit here and talk about and are pissed off about and argue about and dislike. When we say vote with your wallet and all this crap about. And the reason why these developers have been able to do these things is because they get away with it, because the larger majority of the community goes along with it, right? And so I think, that's just going to be something else for these large development companies and large publishing companies are looking for ways to trim the fat in a sense, right? To save a buck here and there. So if they don't have to pay voice actors to do voice lines and stuff like that, they're going to go that route. So whether it's today or a couple years from now, expect your games. We see games nowadays that bring back old aspects, like Baldur's Gate 3 not having any, DLC or battle pass or anything like that. It's a complete game. We see like other games bringing in like old things that used to be there and that we miss as a community of gamers. And when a company comes in and does it, we praise them for doing so. And then in the future, it's going to be voice acting. That's the next thing, right? When they're like, oh, this one's not AI. This is actually, Bob, he's doing the voice of whatever. And it's like, ooh, it's going to be that marketing thing. This one's got real people in it. And that's just where we're headed to, and AI is exciting. The whole aspect of AI, I like it. I love it, really. I think it's exciting. I mean, AI has always been there, but just the focus on that and like all the cool stuff, on my phone, I have Gemini, on my Android, and I love Gemini because every time I look something up, Gemini, it's kind of like the Google search. Like when you search something in Google, it gives you like little synopsis of it, but Gemini is a little bit more detailed in the information it gives you and stuff like that. So I love having it on my phone. So, and Chat GPT and stuff like that. Those are really cool stuff, and the AI is starting to get into a lot more things. A lot of your electronics and phones and they're it's more of a marketing type thing, but really, they're putting stuff in there. But still, though, it's a cool aspect. It's just you can't let it run wild. That's the thing. So our governmental body needs to regulate and make sure that people are protected. Not just actors and actresses, but even average people are protected from somebody using their likeness for revenge porn or, making them say things to their family members or stuff. I mean, I think you had mentioned that one, I can't remember what it was, but like they were using like the auto callers to mimic like their mother or their father's voice and they would call their kid to have them send money or something like that. I mean, and it's just going to get to the point where it's going to be so good. You talk about, the inflections and things like that, but it's going to eventually come. It's going to be where you won't even, I mean, sometimes it's hard now, but it's going to be to the point where that AI generated voice sounds exactly like a real voice, right? Like the real person. You won't be able to tell the difference. It's going to be very difficult. So we've got to put stuff in place today to make sure that in the future we can tell the difference between what is real and what isn't, because you're going to have a really hard time. And that brings a lot of issues, not just for voice acting and things like that, but a lot of things, right? You're talking about companies and politics and all sorts of crap that will influence or could influence among people that are not in the know or don't know that it's fake, right? I mean, that happens now, right? People are duped by stories that are not real, but it's on the internet. It's hard to know what is and what isn't, sometimes. So we've got to put things in place. And so I'm glad that that the voice actors are trying to make sure that their voices are protected. They need to do that. So I back them 100% on getting that done. I'm just afraid for the future as a whole when it comes to AI stuff, right? As far as right now, our government in the US really isn't doing anything to regulate that, the whole AI stuff. And it almost feels like the Wild Wild West out there with AI just running rampant. And so with companies making all sorts of things and people doing all sorts of likenesses and things like that. So there's got to be some reining in of that to make sure that we utilize the technology in good ways, right? And there's always going to be bad actors, but to utilize the technology in good ways that are beneficial while also protecting people's rights against those bad apples or the people that are trying to do bad things with that type of technology. So
Right.
that's what I think.
Yeah, and you can't trust companies, right? Because companies, they're not in it for anything but to make a profit. Like, as much as we try to, good companies, bad companies, what the whole incident with like Scarlett Johansson and OpenAI, you remember hearing about that where they asked her to use her voice and she said no, and then they came out with the GPT for her and the voice sounded a lot like Scarlett Johansson, and it's so much so that she threatened them and they took it down. So I think they did use her voice to make that one, and games have already used like AI voices. I mean, the big one out there is Stellaris. Anybody who knows Stellaris, they used AI generated voices, of real actors in their stuff. They paid the actors royalties still, from what I understand, but still they did that, and as much as people, as much as people will think that AI will never get to the point of being as good as a human, or be able to conceivably fool you that they're a real human. I don't believe that. I believe it will happen, right? Like we have the whole Turing test thing. If anybody knows anything about like AI and stuff like that, Turing test is where they have a AI or a chatbot try to fool you into thinking that they're a real person, and so like Nick was mentioning, there is scams out there where people can go online, check out your Facebook page, find videos that you post to your family, sample 30-second worth of audio from that person speaking and regenerate their voice. And so there's scams out there where they go, hey, I'm with the tow truck driver and my car died. And, I left my wallet at home and my phone at home, and so I'm calling you from his cell. I need you to call the tow truck company at this number and pay the bill to help so I can get towed home and things like that. Just random stuff like that. And it sounds just like their parents, you're not thinking when you get a call like that something bad's happening, so Congress is trying to put together some legislation, and they put together committees and things like that on AI. I think they put together like they've got like some AI commission acts and things like that going on out there, and a blueprint for AI Bill of Rights and type things like that to try to protect people from things like Nick said, somebody making a fake revenge porn or something like that, or could you imagine the political ads that could come out of something like that? Here's this presidential candidate performing an illicit act, and they're like, this is video pulled from, and they don't necessarily specifically mention anything, but they just show it, and people are like, people can't tell. Generative AI is so hard to tell, especially from a typical layperson or anybody just watching something in general, be able to pick apart something that's AI generated with a quick glance, right? Like a lot of times you'll look at an AI picture and you're like, oh, that thing has 3 fingers or it's got an extra arm. But at a quick glance, you don't see that, right? It's just hidden. It's just obscure, And so unless you can actually freeze it and scrutinize it, which I will guarantee you 80 to probably 90% of people don't do, right? I'll even go, if 75% of people don't scrutinize it and only 25% do, you've already fooled 75% out there then, which is enough to sway public opinion one way or the other, right? How we all know that something negative that is falsely accused of somebody spreads like wildfire, especially the more famous they are, the more well-known they are. But when the truth comes out, it doesn't spread with the ferocity that the fake information does. So the majority of people who saw that probably still think that that's real. It happens all the time. And it happens in fake attack ads and fake released information. All it takes is for a seed like that to get out and then spreads like wildfire. And then when the truth comes out, it's a little trickle, So yes, I agree that the government probably needs to step in to help protect some of that, protect identity rights, and that would just prevent this whole shindig from going down. If the government says you can't do that unless explicitly signed away by this person, then this is not a non-issue. But that's the government's but lagged behind on everything. So there's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape to make things like that happen. And they try, I'm going to use air quotes, try to make sure that everything is as tightly wrapped up and as they can, but it never is, right? There's loopholes within loopholes, and they didn't think of this and didn't think of that, or they made it too restrictive, and now you can't even do X, Y, and Z, so but there's so many text to speech editors out there that sound really dang good. Like I've seen the guy who did the whole Helldivers 2 like voice command where he's like asks, I can't remember her name, but he's got an AI bot almost like Friday or Jarvis, for Tony Stark, where he just says something and it will reply to him, and use it with like a macro bot that inputs the commands for the stratagems. It'll ask for this, and it sounds really cool. Sounds really human like. It's hard. It has that little bit of a robotic twang, but it's supposed to be. But I listen to some of the other ones because you can do like so many lines for free on that chat service, and a lot of them sound really human. It's harder to pick their voice apart as not being human, because you're not asking for feeling or anything. You're just asking for a response to a input. So it's a dangerous place out there, especially for voice actors in general, or famous people. Um, you know, I think that the video game developers and publishers out there need to watch their ass, because you're not getting away with this one. They're probably going to strike until it hurts them even more, and we lose a lot more video game developers and publishers because of this. But like I said, it's not like the actors themselves are unionized and together, but each of these video game companies can basically say yay or nay to their whatever demands those guys are putting together. So it may come down to a few holdouts like Activision and Disney, and all these other companies are good to go. Like I said, if you have the production ID, you can go right out there and find out if you're affected or not. So I don't know. Congress needs to hurry up and get something out there to protect it. And generative AI is just like wildfire. It's spreading like crazy. I can remember when ChatGPT came out, and I'm like, this was really good for a large language model. It had some quirks and things like that. And the next thing you know, it's like, we've got generative AI for images. And I was like, wow, I can just type in a thing and it will give me an image, a pretty good image. Sometimes if you put humans or animals in there, they look funky or wonky. But as long as you're not looking for that, you're looking for like scenery and things like that, it was doing pretty good. Now they've gotten a lot better. You get a lot less images with third eyes and 4 ears and 6 fingers on a hand or 2 fingers, or an extra arm or leg. And now we've gotten whole generative AI videos. I mean, if you use anything like Adobe or any of that stuff, the generative AI is built into it. You can take an image of somebody and you can use generative fill AI to do whatever you need to with that person to make a still image. And, and in the videos, you could do some things with GIFs and image and videos. So it's getting to be, it's progressing really quick. And we just had Elon Musk come out with where his own generative AI tool, where it's the largest, and it's going to be one of the I think it's like one of the largest generative AI systems built. And he's just going to run that against the systems he owns, like Twitter and all that stuff. So it's only going to get better with all these companies going all in the generative AI. So Nick, you got anything else on this one? I think we've got everybody's going to be worried about AI, and we're going to get Terminator before long. Terminator's running around.
Skynet's around the corner.
Yeah. Skynet's already there. It's in the background,
Yeah, it's just not awake yet. No, I mean, like I said, the AI stuff is really cool. It really is. If you ever messed around with it or played around with it or used it in any way, it's a really cool piece of software. All the different AI suites out there and everything like that. We just got to make sure as a society and, as our government and society and things like that, that we use it responsibly, which we're bad at doing. So let's try to use it responsibly, because it is cool. I think it'll make things a lot better. It is advancing very quickly. So, we're going to have stuff that's even more amazing than what we see today, but we've got to make sure to rein in the craziness of it. So that way we use it in a positive way and not a bad way.
Yeah, because you can do even songs now. There's a generative AI songs where you can just say, I want a song about X, Y, and Z in this genre, and it will generate something for you that sounds halfway decent, and pretty decent. Like, I've some of the ones that are out on the internet are pretty darn good. There's a guy who does the I Ruined It for you, his stuff was pretty good, but his was a lot of mashups, and then he does some AI, but now you can do an entire AI request on that. I want this in the tune of Hallelujah, or I want this in the tune of Baby Got Back, or whatever, and it will do it for you. And it sounds really good, really decent. So, now people who are audiophiles and musicians can probably pick it apart. But for the normal person like myself, I can't pick a lot of that apart. Sometimes I can hear a little bit of robotic, but not in most those cases. So, so let us know what you think down in the comments. Are you worried about the delay of your most anticipated video game because of this strike? What do you think about all the generative AI out there? Do you think this warrants government oversight into this? Or are you worried about government oversight? You don't think that the government should be stepping or putting its hands into this type of stuff. What do you think? Everybody has their own opinions about too much government oversight, not enough government oversight. It's a battle between two sides on that stuff. Usually, you either care that there's too much, or you think there's too little, or you don't care at all. Some people are just like, I don't care. So let us know what you think down in the comments. And you've reached the end of this episode. We need some of those subscribers. So if you've listened and haven't subscribed, help us out. The more subscribers we get, the more we can keep doing this, because we enjoy just talking crap about video games and all that stuff. And make sure you hit that bell to get notified when we post new videos, because we post multiple videos every week. When we hope you enjoy this episode and hope to catch you in the next one.